The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory be to you, O Lord.
The Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeon, and the money changers sitting there. And making a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and oxen. And he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And he told those who sold the pigeons, "Take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of trade." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." So the Jews said to him, "What sign do you show us for doing these things?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews said, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you will raise it up in 3 days." But he was speaking about the temple of his body. When therefore he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scriptures and the word that Jesus had spoken. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Please open your Bibles to John chapter 2, verses 13 to 22. John chapter 2, verses 13 to 22. So, my dear brothers and sisters, the church today celebrates, as I said, the feast of the dedication of the Lateran Basilica in Rome. It's the oldest and the highest ranking of the 4 major basilicas. There are 4 basilicas in Rome: St. Peter, St. John Lateran, Santa Maria Maggiore, and St. Paul outside the walls. And of these 4, the St. John Lateran is the highest ranking of them. Now, the Basilica of St. John Lateran is the highest ranking because it is really the cathedral of the Diocese of Rome, the official ecclesiastical seat of the Holy Father, who is the Bishop of Rome, and not St. Peter's Basilica, as most Catholics think it is. Most Catholics, if you ask them which is the mother church, they will all say St. Peter's. You are far from the truth. It is St. John Lateran. Now, let me explain to you first very quickly, when I said that this is the mother church. Look, in every archdiocese or diocese, you will have one cathedral. That is the mother church. The very word cathedral comes from the chair of the bishop called cathedra. That's where you get the word cathedral. To put it very generally, it's for those who like the concept of Air Force One, the airplane of the President of the United States. As long as the President rides on any plane, it doesn't have to be a specific one, that is Air Force One. Now, if tomorrow they decide that for some reason that the bishop wants to move his cathedral, not that easy that he can do it, but just to give you, if he moves to your parish, then your parish will stop being called the church of so-and-so, but the cathedra. Why? Because the bishop now, his official seat is there. As I said, it's not that easy, but just to give you a kind of a concept. So the Bishop of Rome, who is also the Holy Father, remember one of the titles of the Holy Father is the Bishop of Rome, his cathedral is not St. Peter's. It is St. John Lateran, and that is the feast that we are celebrating today. Now, this cathedral was built at the time of the Emperor Constantine. Remember, I've told you that Constantine was the first Roman emperor, and it was consecrated as early as 324 by Pope Sylvester. Originally, this cathedral was dedicated to Christ the Redeemer, but there was an earthquake in the year 896, and the cathedral was destroyed, and the church was rebuilt a couple of years and dedicated in 896 by Pope Sergius III, who then dedicated it to St. John the Baptist. If you go there today, right at the top of the church, you will see a beautiful marble statue of St. John the Baptist. Now, in the ancient Roman Church, all baptisms in Rome were conducted only in St. John Lateran. So now you can see how important this church was. The present basilica, of course, stands on the site of an older palace. Rome has famously 7 hills, and Caelian Hill is one of them, which formerly this was the palace of a noble family called the Laterani. That's why it's called St. John Lateran, because it was owned by this noble family. And the palace was really part of a dowry of Fausta. Fausta was the wife of the Emperor Constantine. And when it was given to Constantine, he gave part of this palace to the Pope so that the Pope could then reside there. For several centuries, the popes never resided at St. Peter's, they resided at St. John Lateran. Till today, the Holy Father, earlier on Maundy Thursday, for the ordination of priests, for all these ceremonies, he would go back to St. John Lateran. Now, of late, they've been even ordaining priests of Rome in St. Peter's Basilica, but earlier, the previous popes would always go to St. John Lateran. Now, today the liturgy celebrates the dedication of the Lateran Basilica. It's called, as I said, the mother and the head of all the churches of the city of Rome and of the world. And that is the reason why today it's a feast day. We have 2 readings. We sing the Gloria. Now, initially, the observance of this feast was confined only to the city of Rome, but somewhere in the year 1565, it was extended to the entire city of the country of Italy, and then as a great sign of affection and love that links the Mother Church to all of us, it was extended to the whole world. I was reading up a little bit about this, and I found a very nice homily that Pope Benedict XVI, our Emeritus Holy Father, please pray for him. He's in very, very frail health. In 2008, he said something very nice. He said that this feast celebrates a mystery that is always relevant. This is what he said. He said, God desires to build a spiritual temple in the world, a spiritual temple, a community that worships him in spirit and truth. He begins first by stressing that we are a spiritual community that is dedicated to Jesus. And I'll explain this even more in the explanation of the gospel. But this observance of this celebration not only first focuses on who we are as a community in relationship to Jesus, it also reminds us of the importance of our material buildings in which the community gathers. We need a structure in order to praise God. The difficulty is sometimes we end up giving more importance to a structure than the community of believers who worship within the structure. And Pope Benedict is warning, as it were, that we could get it wrong. So it is true that every community must take care of its own structures, and we should, because this is part of the very precious religious and historic patrimony of the church. Very often we find that older churches fall into disuse. If you go abroad, you will see several of the Anglican and the mainline Reformist churches, because they could not even look after these churches, they have now become homes of the rich and famous. They have become pubs and discos. They have been deconsecrated. I don't think any Catholic church as yet has been used for these purposes, but I know several other churches. Some years ago when I was in Rome, I met with the present Cardinal Peter Turkson's, at that time he was Cardinal Peter Turkson's secretary. Now he himself is a cardinal. And he was telling me, he said, very interestingly, he said at that point of time, because I was interested in history, he says in Italy, he says, we have so many churches, each one more beautiful and glorious than the other. And many of them were supported for years by the noble families that still exist in Italy. And he said quite recently, one of the princesses or one of the noble families of Rome offered the Vatican, of course offered the Holy Father, but offered the Vatican a very, very beautiful church that was in their possession because they used to pay for the upkeep. And he said that the response of the Vatican was thank you, but no thank you, because they have so many of them that just to look after them is a huge challenge. You will remember also that on Good Friday, we make a collection during the Good Friday veneration of the cross for the upkeep of the Holy Land, of the churches in the Holy Land. These need to be preserved. So not only building new churches, but preserving all these churches, but even more, not at the cost of the community itself. Now, the Gospel of today, and I'd like to do a bit of explanation, is taken from John chapter 2. It's the episode about the cleansing of the temple, and is placed in John's Gospel. It is placed immediately after the wedding feast of Cana in chapter 2. It is Passover, and Jesus cleanses the temple. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you will find that the cleansing of the temple is the last and final act. It is the act after the entry of Jesus into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. He goes and cleanses. It is the last act, as it were, which in a way is the last nail in Jesus' coffin, not in the Gospel of John. In the Gospel of John, you'll see that John positions the cleansing of the temple right in the beginning of the Gospel in John chapter 2. Now, John also adds many more details to this narrative than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. He will write about, as you heard, sheep and oxen along with the doves, which the other evangelist mentions. He will also talk about Jesus making a cord and then turning to address in a special way the dove sellers separately as he overturns their tables too. In John's Gospel, what is the last or the final nail in Jesus' coffin, as it were, the Jews plotting, is not the cleansing of the temple. In the Gospel of John, you'll notice that it is the raising of Lazarus. As soon as Lazarus is raised, many people come to believe in Jesus. And the Jews find this really dangerous. They say, let's not only put Jesus to death, but let us put Lazarus to death, because on account of this miracle, many of the Jews have come to believe. So why does the evangelist narrate this incident so differently from the others? And then finally, what has this got to do also? How do we link it to the feast of today? Now, one thing I need to say, that commercialization of religion is a dangerous business. Yeah. I know many of you want to comment, you would like me to comment about it, because your mind is going to several churches that have several stalls and selling of candles and flowers, etc., etc. I'm not going to get into that controversy because I know I'm going to get stoned. Not that I'm afraid to speak my mind, yeah. But sometimes when you don't have, I think sometimes a 10 minutes or 15-minute homily is not enough to cover all your thoughts, and very often what is not said because of a lack of time is very glibly misinterpreted. So don't think that I'm not afraid to speak my mind about this. So commercialization of religion is a very dangerous business, but that is not what this narration is all about, whether the temple had become commercialized. St. John wants to make a point, and let's not miss the woods for the trees. We are told that the occasion of Jesus' presence in the temple is the Passover. You will actually find it mentioned there. And of course, if you have such a large religious function, you're going to have some amount of commercialization, or some commerce always goes hand in hand with the activity of any religion. I can't imagine Bandra Fair without those 100 stalls. Now, whether you want to get lost in those stalls is one business. If you want, you can go straight to the church. So the choice is always yours. We shouldn't make a big fuss about all of this. But the Jews of the diaspora, Those who don't live in Jerusalem were called the Jews of the diaspora. And the Jews in the area were, interestingly, when they came to the Passover, were not allowed to bring any graven image into the temple. Remember that the Jews were not allowed to bring an idol. They were not idol worshippers. Now, the coinage at that time, as I will explain also in Luke's Gospel in the coming days, this text will come again. The coinage at that time was a Roman currency. In fact, there were several currencies considering how large the Roman Empire was. But on the coinage, you would have the seal of the emperor which had his image. Therefore, you could not bring a graven image in any form into the temple. Therefore, what did you do? You see, the temple had several courts. You had the court of the Gentiles, you had the court of the women, you had the court of the men, then you had the innermost temple where you had the sacrifices, and then the Holy of Holies. We are in the outermost courtyard, which is called the court of the Gentiles, and it is here that all this business used to be transacted. So when you entered the temple, you had to first, as it were, make sure that you surrendered or exchanged your coins with the Roman emperor's seal on it for the Jewish shekel, which didn't have any symbols on it. And here is where the money changers made their money. Obviously, like we have money changers today, they charge you a percentage, and the guys at the time of Jesus were charging a very hefty percentage. There was another problem in the temple. You see, if you brought your own sheep or your own goat or your whatever you brought, the issue was that if you brought it there, then it had to be inspected. Inspected by whom? By the priests. And in all probability, they would say, remember, you have to bring a sheep or a dove or whatever you brought without any blemish, without any defect. The idea was to give the best to God. But these guys would always find some issue with it and say, I'm sorry, you can't offer the sheep. So people had grown accustomed over a period of time to simply purchase the sheep or the doves from the temple, which was certified, obviously, by the priests. There was very clearly a collusion between the priests and these sellers, which means that the sheep that were sold in the court of the Gentiles was sold at a premium. Now, did all of this lead to the righteous anger? Of course, Jesus is angry also about this, but did it lead only, was he angry only about this? Not really, not really. You see, in the Gospel of John, Jesus is not acting against corruption, or let me put it this way, he's not only acting against corruption. He's not only acting against corruption. And we know this because when Jesus commands those who were selling the doves, if you look at your text, it's strikingly different from the accounts of Matthew's. You see, instead of the concern for temple malpractices that we pick up in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, where they are called the den of robbers, here Jesus says he orders that his Father's house is not made into a marketplace. His Father's house. This is so different from the other three Gospels. His Father's house. So the answer is in the first few words when Jesus calls the temple his Father's house. His Father's house. What is Jesus doing? Jesus is redefining worship not merely to be a place, not merely to be a temple in the Gospel of John, but he is redefining worship as worship in him. In him. Let me give you an example. If you look at the Gospel of John in chapter 4, you will see that he gets into a dialogue with a Samaritan woman, chapter 4, verse 21. And he will say to her, woman, believe me, the time will come when you will neither worship on this temple, which was the temple at Gerizim, or on that temple, which was the temple of Jerusalem, but you will worship in spirit and in truth. He was saying, you will worship me. Again, in John chapter 9, verse 35 to 38, when Jesus heals the blind man, we are told that the blind man, after he can see, in response to his healing, begins to worship Jesus, not the temple. begins to worship Jesus. So in John's Gospel, and this is key, and this is what we need to understand, the very physical body of Jesus is now the new holy place. Jesus is the temple. Jesus is the holy place. And Jesus is the new Jerusalem. As we heard in the Gospel today, Jesus' body is the temple which would be torn down by the Jews but would be raised up in 3 days by the Father. And this is the point that John wants to make to us. So is there a takeaway from all of this? I think most certainly, and with this I want to end. You see, we can ask ourselves this: is our spiritual resolve to worship Jesus, is there a spiritual resolve to worship Jesus, or do we simply get caught up very often in cult and ceremonial celebrations, which I call temple ceremonies? Is it the Lord that we seek, or do we seek the incidentals of cult and cultic practices? Please don't get me wrong. Don't make a mistake. I'm not diminishing the role of cult. It is very important as an expression of our faith, but is our faith in Jesus primary? And this is what Pope Benedict in 2008 was trying to highlight. Yes, we need to maintain our structures. We need to maintain our buildings. But even more, we need to understand that we need to put our hands in the life of Jesus, who is the temple. And that is what really we are being called to on the feast of the dedication of St. John Latran.